I said, no, not at all, this would be great. And then a couple nights ago, he says, I'm going to apologize, it's not going to be a very big group. I said, well, I kind of like that better, to be honest. And then to find out, that some of the crowd is guys that I've grown up with and worked with over the years and seen and stole stuff from and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of very intimate and very perfect. So it's been a great day so far. Hopefully I can touch to it or add to it a little bit. So like you talked about, what you guys want to know more about the speed and power stuff, but also kind of how you plan it out. So that's what we're going to go and delve into. This whole idea of making people faster and more powerful from far out to right before they go. First, for me, it's, as everybody's touched in, and that's the beauty. I'll listen to old coaches forever. And if those of you younger coaches ever looked back in the back of the room there, us old guys are taking just as many notes as you are. It's not like we've seen it all, done it all. There's always, lifelong learning. But for me, there's always a why to it. So, first of all, I have to ask why, what's it got to be about? Is it because it feels good, because it looks good, or actually because it functions well? Same thing. Is it an activity? Is it just, hey, this is an activity, this is great. They're working hard, they're sweating, they're puking. This is a great activity. Or is it really activating something that helps performance? Along those same lines, is it something that an outside source has to manipulate? Is it something that a sports medicine person or a coach or something that has to manipulate to get them to go better? Or is it something that execution, with training constraints, the different things that you put, use of a hill versus use of flat ground, going barefoot versus using shoes? Is it something where they execute better because of those constraints instead of us forcing it along the way? And then finally, is it a symptomatic approach or a systematic approach? I'm an old school guy. I've been around long enough that I was a high school basketball coach for a while. And I actually got to go watch John Wooden conduct a practice and then also conduct pre-game things before a tournament. Everything was systematic. Everybody on his team could dribble and they could pass because he had a systematic approach to how they would do that. So, rest in peace, Bill Walton. When Bill Walton walked into his program, he didn't go, okay, you don't dribble well, so we're just going to set up practices and movements so you don't have to dribble. No, he had a systematic approach where he learned how to dribble better or how to pass better, and that's the deal. So a lot of what I see today, I've got all these young coaches that come and work with me and stuff like that. They'll change, I'm not going to teach the Olympic list because these guys can't pull from the floor very well. Well, that's your systematic approach teaches them that. You don't just automatically just go to hex bars. Hex bars are a good tool, but that's not, you don't just make it a symptom approach. You have to have a systematic approach to how you do that. So for me, it's training movements more than you train muscles. Yes, the muscles are going to get trained, but they're going to get trained within the systematic approach to how you do things. So we talked about planning. So, okay, how do you fit your program into your big plan, your big picture of that? And so since it's Olympic year, Paris Olympics, that type of thing, then that's what we'll look at a certain point. That's where Olympic Games are usually at the end of the summer, so that's where our torch or our culmination begins. So we work backward from there. In season leads you up to that culmination point. Could be this high school state championship. It could be any of those kind of things. Then you have a preseason approach to that competitive in season. Off season is usually the point across from that, and then there's some type of postseason. We could also label it a transition phase to a preparatory phase, period, to a pre-competitive period, and then to a competitive period. Within those periods, you can take any one of those boxes, put it out here, and we have different phases that we work with. This is a good old way back in the 1980s, two-door bump up approach to things, how you phase things through there, okay? So again, look at now, here's the competition. 800 meters in the Olympic Games. What do we do 10 minutes before that, 10 hours before that, 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months? I use the number 10, but it could be 6, or it could be 12. It could be any of those things, however you want to pad it out. But it's just the thought process that you work back from and then leads you back to there. So let's go back to perspectives then. Again, what's my why? Why? What's my training application of both strength and speed? Well, when I was in college, I took physics. I passed it barely. But the main thing I remember, the only thing that had quality in terms of the whole physics, I had struggled with the electricity part and all that other kind of stuff. But the good old power is force times distance over time. Force application, resistive overloads. Put more weight on the bar, or go up a hill instead of flat ground. Use gravity as an approach. That's where the whole plyometric part came in. Your own body weight versus the effects of gravity, dropping from height, all those kinds of things. Then there's the time reduction. That's the temporal overloads. Doing things with a higher speed of movement. Increased speed, increased acceleration. Those are huge words in terms of performance. The ability to surge, burst, or accelerate. I work with marathon runners. In fact, most of the professional athletes I work with now are either middle distance runners or distance runners. But if at that level, if they can't make surges or accelerate or burst, they're not making a medal stand. They might be lucky to be middle of the pack in that realm, regardless of the distance. But the big thing is, and that's why I have trouble with physics, because the physics teachers say, well, really, you don't have to worry about the distance. It's just force over time in terms of a power quotient. And I said, no, I work with athletes. Distance is a huge deal. Because how do you do these overloads through the space of your body? What kind of agility, what kind of coordination, what kind of synchronization gets you to be low to high, high to low, and those kind of things. So if you're not able to improve your distance transition through your own body, then you're going to struggle to be very powerful. And so then we come up with developing strength. Okay? It's a key factor. Everybody's talked about that. Okay? Get stronger, you'll get better. You have the opportunity to get better. Well, for us, in my little hierarchy of how we do this, you have to start with core strength. Even that, for a lot of people, needs a definition. So our definition here is the ability to handle your own body weight versus the effects of gravity. Okay? It's a checklist of 4 things for me: posture, balance, stability, mobility. So for me, a single leg squat without anything is a better example of a core strength exercise than laying down on your back and doing 40 reps of curl up or a dead bug exercise or something like that. Everybody wants to make that a core thing, but there's no balance challenge, there's no posture challenge, there's no stability challenge. You're laying flat on your back and doing these movements. Here you have all those challenges, or even just taking a stick or a light bar and doing an overhead squat. That was mentioned earlier today too. The core development involved in that from an upright movement position is way better than any other things where we're just making our abs sore. So we begin with that, because if we can establish good posture, balance, stability, and mobility activities there, Rob touched on this in terms of his progressions as well, then when we get to absolute strength, absolute strength definition, how much of an overload can your body handle, regardless of any condition? Doesn't matter how heavy you are or how light you are, how much of an overload can you handle? But again, we're talking about athletics here and moving your body against somebody else's body or up against the ground to other places, across the track, across the court, all those kinds of things. So then it's necessary to have this great strength be relative to our body mass. So now we want relative strength. if the guy in this picture was squatting 600 pounds but weighed 400 pounds, how is that in terms of relative to the guy that's squatting 500 pounds but weighs 195? Okay? He's going to be able to get his body to move across the effects of gravity across the ground or against an opponent with a little more power production than the other person, even though the strength is great. We need this, that helps this helps that. Because now what we're doing is we're moving in a manner where we can start to add speed to what we do. And that's the definition of, for our purposes here, the definition of dynamic strength is your ability to handle gravity with good speed. But even this has some limitations. Okay? The vertical jump is a fantastic determiner of dynamic strength. If you got the person that can squat 600 pounds but has a low vertical jump, you know they're lacking speed in their system, and that's where the training needs to go. But you also have these guys that are, you walk in the gym and they're dunking the ball behind their head, or they're jumping up over all these things, but they hardly could even squat their own body weight or anything like that. Well, they need more strength in their system, that type of thing. That'll all manifest itself with how they jump from there. But again, the limitation there is, in terms of the true athletic world, is that's a one-shot deal. I can get my hips high in the air on a jump, but then what about the next one? It's the person that can be elastic with that. Can I do that same height of jump 3 times in a row as quick off the ground as possible? My best way of saying it is, are you a super ball or are you a tomato? Of course, I'm aging myself there because some of the athletes I work with now don't even know what a super ball is. So I have to use like a golf ball or some other kind of deal, right? But that's the true goal, is to take this strength and develop greater strength through how it relates to our body weight, but then also make it very Super Bowl-like. And that's our transition of athleticism. And so that, if you remember the stair-step thing we were working back from, that's our 10-month goal and objective or plan, is to keep getting stronger and have that strength application progress and move in a manner like so. But then we get into, again, what is truly strength. I tried to give a little bit of context to it there, but even more so here in the context of how it coordinates itself in athletic movement. Okay? The ability to, again, burst, surge, accelerate. You see common themes here. The ability to have good straight line stick figure shapes and drive the knees apart. A lot of my colleagues, the places just call it shapes. What kind of shape training are you doing? Are you training shapes from there? Okay, this is actually an old concept that's been revisited many, many times. You start with, and it was mentioned earlier, a couple of things, Coach McFarland and Roth. You start with technique, good body posture cues, that's number one. And then once you have those shapes, trainings like some of my colleagues talk about, then you make those shapes and those movements stronger, create more power, impulse. That was that athletic timeline that we were working there. So, but if you get stronger without the technique, then oftentimes you have to restart over again, or don't even get that opportunity. You just got that habit. So it comes down for me a couple of things. How well do you not negotiate the ground? And negotiating ground is a lot of times due to postural control. Again, core training, is your core training helping this, or is it actually hindering this? When I watch a lot of the kids come in, and some of my assistant coaches have them doing all these dead bugs exercises, they're not even getting to a point where they're moving correctly at the hips. So is that dead bug exercise helping us? Yeah, it's giving us a burn in certain areas in the core. Or is it hindering us from doing things like this? Okay. And I'm circling this area here because the old coach's eye, as you watch your people move, you can see certain things. So when we know in good, fast running, moving forward, when the stance leg is mid-foot, the knee should be either even, this knee of the swing leg should be either even or slightly ahead. If we're truly going to run effectively at fast paces, at fast tempos in that direction. Mid-stance, knees even or ahead. The more space you see in between the legs, the more you're actually training slower and putting yourself or those athletes in a situation where they're going to pull themselves down the track or the field and that type of thing. It also applies to agility or change of direction movement. And here's the beauty of it for me. It doesn't matter whether it's a football game from the 1920s or the 2020s. 100 years, there's a lot of stuff different over those 100 years. Obviously, the stadiums are different. The surfaces are different. The uniforms, the helmets, the shoulder pads, the footwear especially. I have another slide I show of Mac Robinson, who was a 200-meter runner in the 1936 Olympics, and then our 200-meter champ from last year. And obviously the shoes have made a major difference, and the track surfaces. So me as a strength coach and sprint coach, how much have I really impacted guys of this day and age when you know, the guys that were street cleaners and then came to practice, and then versus the guys that are doing all this fancy training, and all we really did is make shoes better than track. But anyway, the point is, you can see it. Whoever's going to be successful here or there, are they going to tackle him or is he going to get away? Say, in these two places, it's who's got the better posture and position. Okay? When the foot is in the ground, is the knee already ahead and heading in the direction he wants to go? So whether it's running straight ahead, or whether I'm coming at you and then I want to get off in that direction, this knee should, at mid-stance, this knee should already be going in that direction. If it's behind, it's less likely I'll make that cut, and it's highly likely that I'll get an ACL injury or something like that from that standpoint. So you can see it. So regardless of how they train, how we train, and that type, physics hasn't changed over all these years. Now, maybe with global warming and all that other stuff that's going on, physics will change. But right now, you can still bet that the people that are going to be successful here coordinated those shapes and movements in the proper way. So now we get back to, and it was awesome. Coach Werner mentioned it right from the get-go of his talk. You don't want to train failure. You want to work hard. You want to train to certain points. But if you're always failing or you're always negatively practicing, then where's that getting us? And this is what I see on those 2 points I was just making. I see all these drills. Good old warm-up drills. Well, coach, just makes my quads feel better and all that type of thing. Okay, movement versus muscle. Anytime you see the feet moving farther apart than the knees, then you're hindering the aspects we were talking about. So why train? Right? It's not that a butt kick drill might not be a good thing as long as the butt kick drill is more piston-like instead of pendulum-like. Because now we're training feet farther apart than the knees. Even things that a lot of people for all the years have said, oh, this is a good agility drill. Well, actually it's not. The feet are moving, but the hips aren't. And those two football pictures, it wasn't about whose feet were going faster and better. It was whose hips are going to be here, and then they're going to be over here. And who's going to get away or who's going to get to the tackle, and that type of thing. So if you're training your feet moving wider than your knees and all these things, then are you truly training something that's transferable and in the context of how we want to be successful on a field, a court, a track, a mat, those kinds of things. And even in the case of, okay, we're trying to do more rehabilitation and this poor guy's glute doesn't fire. Okay, so we got to get the glute to fire. Okay, I understand, again, maybe targeting a muscle once in a while, but if you have a steady diet of where you're moving the feet wider than the knees and you're practicing and training pulling versus pushing, then that's going to manifest itself in performance or lack of performance. And this is a picture you see in my early days of coaching. You saw me with this picture of guys, you know, the gassers and all that kind of thing. And everybody in the room says, hey, this is awesome. They're sweating, they're huffing, they're puffing. A few of them are puking on the sidelines. This has been a great day. And then if we go by the context of how we're supposed to move quickly and effectively over the ground. So as their coach, did I really get done what I really needed to get done and make them better, more efficient? Condition them, but condition them with efficiency, movement efficiency, and repeatability of how to move fast and negotiate the ground with proper shapes. Right? And every speaker's already mentioned that today about training smarter instead of just training harder. So it gets back down to, again, what we're talking about. What's my why? My why is I want to be effective on how we're going to move with power and explosion. I want all this strength that we manifested in the weight room with the squats and the pulls and the cleans and the snatches and the jerks. I want it to manifest itself, and again, this ability to finish push. Drive the knees apart. That's acceleration. And then when we do get up to speed, we transition to trying to run fast across the field, like that picture I just showed. We want it to more look like this, where the mechanics don't create back space behind us. This space apart is good because it's in push. But now when we're running, we don't want that space to be apart. We want to decrease the contact time, so we want it to be right back down underneath. Pistony versus what we call whipping. Lift and whip. Get the hips to project and do those kind of things. And again, it's not just running straight ahead. If I'm a guy that's going to make a slight cut, there's somebody coming from here and I want to do a speed cut, same thing. I want to be able to drive this knee in position and then whip that foot back down so I can get away from whoever's trying to tackle me there, as opposed to maybe it's a power cut. We saw that there. I still want the foot underneath the hip. The knee is already heading in the direction I need to go. It's all these same move at the hip mechanics versus move at the knee. How much of the training that I'm doing with them is helping this versus hindering it. So, like in training, 10 months to 10 weeks and that type of thing, there's got to be a progression to it. Every coach has already talked about this. Probably showed you all his progressions, all his circuit progressions from there. And again, I'm a simple guy, so we just start out with how to move the hip. It's called a sway drill. We get the hips moving first instead of the feet, and we do it in a progressive manner there, and then we can get to starts. Yeah, we start with starts. Where do you start, coach? Starts. Okay, and forward starts, lateral starts, backward starts. But we can become more efficient and agile and explosive on the field if we eliminate false steps. The best way to eliminate false steps is start in the position where you want to go and get your hips going. And then you can elastically lead into it. We do drops, or we hop over hurdles and then hop over that last hurdle, then you get into which leg is going to hit the ground underneath your hip and where your knee's going to go. The knee's going to go across, the knee's going to go out, power cut versus speed cut. And then you start to do it under other constraints, cone drills, things like that. And then you start to do it in a reaction. There's two guys racing, there's cones there that they have to negotiate, but there's somebody down here giving them a direction. Could have pointed right, could have pointed left, could have pointed back to where they started from. So now you're just progressing these established, don't have false steps, get the hips moving first, hips first mindset, and now we can get to where we can be really reactive and gain skill and drill-wise. We're going to go back to the old proverbial periodized planning part of it, right? Hey, back then, and it was a good foundation for us. A lot of people, at least we had a plan, right? So like with endurance training, you start with general endurance. Could be anything. You bike, you ski, you swim, you do anything that just builds up your endurance. And then you start, if you're a runner, you start doing more running endurance things. If you're a cyclist, you start doing more cycling. And then you try to perfect the specific thing that you're doing, whether you're a 10,000 meter runner or a 5,000 meter speed skater, those kind of things. We thought, okay, same works for speed. Let's build up a base, get aerobically sound, then we'll start to become more anaerobic with it, start to have interval training, and then we'll try to really get fast. And then we can apply that to whatever it is. We're a 100-meter sprinter, or we're a DB, or wide receiver, or those kind of things. The problem is if we look at the context of how things develop, it doesn't really work that way. Okay? So what are we going to do now? You were doing all this stuff, so the last 10 weeks you had perfected speed development, or perfected endurance. Okay? The issue is, going from general to more specific, is there's a whole lot of weeks, the 40 or 50 some weeks before you got to your 10-week in season, where you were doing not specific enough fast movements. Okay? For the strength part of it, yeah, sometimes you need a build-up. You got to do some bodybuilding, some adaptation, those kind of things, so that you can do maximum work and then convert. But in terms of really being explosive and powerful on a court or on a field, this whole aerobic to anaerobic means you were doing sub-max stuff. And then the other part of it is these straight lines that just go from one to the other, then other to the other. It doesn't work that way, right? It has to be a blend. You have to blend in and out of these types of things. So here, how do you do anaerobic endurance when you're trying to get your football team or your basketball team to get ready to start develop speed? Well, you do what I just showed. You work long intervals. You do shuttle runs, or you do beat tests, or you do gassers and that type of thing. But like the picture showed, sometimes that building up aerobic and anaerobic endurance, for me, I'd stand there and I'd watch, and this is what I was seeing. Working hard, coach. That type of thing. And I go, yeah, I'm working you in the wrong direction. Because I sure don't want to see that on game days or game nights or things like that. So, and as Coach pointed out, Dan Taft's a pretty intelligent guy. So one time we were together at a deal, and he says, yeah, the model's backwards. You do your endurance work at the end, when you're being specific to what you do, right? And so if we want to truly be not only fitter in the season, but fitter because we built a base of endurance, but we built it with efficiency. Because again, you start with starts and jumps and accelerations and push. So when we would come back at the start of a brand new year, whatever it is, we went to a bowl game or we went to the NCAA tournament in basketball or volleyball or whatever, you get a couple weeks off or whatever. When you come back, what do we start with? We start with starts and short accelerations, 5-yard accelerations, 5-meter accelerations, accelerations up hills, accelerations with sleds. But all that's doing is, and we go as fast as possible. We're only going as fast as possible for 5 yards. And then a couple weeks later, it's 10 yards. And then a couple weeks later, it's 15 yards. But you're always going fast, and you're always not only rehearsing those shapes, those acceleration, quality, move at the hip, drive the knees apart shapes, but you're also setting the tempo and the rhythm of how you want to compete also. No one wants to compete. I'll get there this way. So that's what you start with. And then, as you progress that, you start to weave in longer speed drills. Again, sometimes for me, I'll do longer speed drills and say, okay, we're out on the grass, everybody's shoes and socks off. Because I have to coach less proper foot and ankle mechanics. They automatically move at the hip more than at the knee when their toes are exposed to the ground. They want to keep their toes up. They want to land midfoot, those kind of things. Even when we do agility type things, they want to cut full-footed instead of rolling over on the side of the ankle or those kind of things. So we just progress that way. And then finally, we start to do more of the interval drills. Okay, we're going to do these sprints with 20 seconds rest, or with 30 seconds rest, or those kind of things. Or we're going to do these agility drills. You got to put 3 agility drills in a minute. That type of thing. And that's a better progression. And people People would come out to watch us do our summer conditioning. Home posture, they got to get their hip around, they got to drive the knees apart. If we can do turn and run mechanics, if I can be here, quality postural position, and drive out this way, then later on, if he comes out, sprint in, plant drive, and sprint out. I didn't have to, because I wasn't used to those shapes or those body positions, I didn't have to go, don't step and go. I could just in and out. Because I've already rehearsed how to burst out. Now it's just getting in and burst out.